Hello everyone. Welcome to Economics Simplified. Today we are going to start microeconomics and our very first topic is utility maximization. Now utility is a very important topic for both bachelors and masters in economics, and here we are going to break it down bit by bit, starting from the course of bachelors moving to a more advanced course that is relevant in your master's course. So let's start. Now, in microeconomics, utility refers to the capacity of a commodity or service to satisfy human wants. It is a psychological concept as it depends on the mental satisfaction felt by the consumer after consuming a good. Utility does not mean usefulness in moral or social sense. Even harmful goods like cigarettes can have utility if they provide satisfaction to the consumer. So this was the definition. In simple words, if we understand, so utility is something, it is a concept, it is like the satisfaction that you derive from consuming a good. Suppose you are eating a chocolate, and the satisfaction that you have from eating a chocolate, you cannot express it to someone in words, or you cannot tell how much satisfied you are in words, but that feeling that you have in microeconomics, that we call as utility. There are two types of utility, that is total utility and marginal utility. Now, total utility is the total satisfaction obtained by a consumer from consuming a given quantity of good. So, whenever you are consuming something, whenever let's say you are eating a toffee or a chocolate or a pizza, so the total satisfaction that you had at the end of your meal, that is total utility. Okay, and don't confuse it with like ki we have utility only when we are eating things. Whenever you are watching something, you are consuming any kind of good, whether it could be shopping, it could be watching movie in the hall, or it could be eating, having a meal, anything. The satisfaction that you have in yourself, that is called utility. And the total utility, the total satisfaction that you have is called total utility. Now the second thing, now behavior of total utility, how total utility is shown in economics. First, total utility increases at a diminishing rate, like it increases, but it increases at a decreasing rate, that is called diminishing rate. After a certain point, it reaches its maximum. So if we can see, this is the graph, and first it increases slowly, and when it increases at the topmost part, which it reaches in the maximum, then it begins to decline. So this becomes the graph of your total utility. Now, the second type of utility is marginal utility. Marginal utility is the additional satisfaction obtained from consuming one more unit of a commodity. So, like whenever you are consuming something, whenever you are eating something, you have utility at per each bite. So, whenever the next bite that you are consuming and the amount of utility you got from that next bite, it is called marginal utility. In economics, there is a formula for calculating marginal utility, and that is we differentiate total utility with respect to the quantity, so we get marginal utility. Now from the equation like this formula, we can understand the behavior of the marginal utility. So when consumption increases, marginal utility declines. That means with every each bite, your marginal utility decreases. When the total utility reaches its maximum, marginal utility is zero, because that point you are most satisfied, and from any additional consumption your utility is not going to increase. So that is like the maximum of total utility, and their marginal utility becomes zero. And when total utility starts declining, so like you are increasing your consumption but your total utility is declining, you are you can see like after a certain point when your stomach is full, and if you are eating in full stomach, you are not really satisfied with the food, right? You get uneasiness. So that is your total utility is now declining after reaching a certain amount of consumption, and there the marginal utility becomes negative. Now here it is an important law, that is law of diminishing marginal utility. The statement is the law of diminishing marginal utility states that as a consumer consumes more and more units of a commodity, the marginal utility derived from each additional unit goes on decreasing, provided other factors remain constant. So it really like depicts the concept of marginal utility declining. It's like whenever you are consuming more and more units of a commodity, after a certain amount of consumption, the marginal utility that is you will derive from increasing your consumption, it will decrease. Other factors are remain constant, like your stomach has the same size, you have the same budget. So after that, if you increase your consumption, your marginal utility will decline. This is the law of diminishing marginal utility. Now, another concept is how we can measure utility. You have seen, like I told you, like you are satisfied from a good. So how you can measure it? How you can say that how much satisfied you are? So there are two approaches to measure utility. The first one is cardinal utility approach, that was given by Marshall. He was a famous economist. And the second one is ordinal utility approach. We are going to learn about both of them. Now starting with cardinal utility approach. Here it says that cardinal utility approach assumes that utility can be measured numerically in absolute terms, just like weight or height. According to this approach, a consumer can express how much satisfaction he gets from consuming a commodity in quantitative units called utils. This approach was developed by Alfred Marshall and is based on the law of diminishing marginal utility. So here it is saying that in cardinal approach, the economists assume that we can measure our utility in numeric terms. Like I can tell you that I got 5 utils of utility by eating pizza. In that sense, like you can measure how much satisfaction you got in the units of utils. That is how you can measure how much utility you got. So in numeric terms, different person can have different numeric terms for consuming same amount of good. Okay, now in cardinal utility approach, this is the equation that they have given for measuring utility or getting the relationship between marginal utility and price. So here we have if let's say there are two goods, that is x and y, and the consumer is consuming two goods. Now here it is called marginal utility from x upon marginal utility from y is equal to price of x upon price of y. This is the equation given in cardinal approach. Now the second approach to measure utility is ordinal utility approach, and it is also called indifference curve approach. I'm going to tell more about indifference approach in the later in the video. Now the ordinal utility approach states that utility cannot be measured numerically, but consumers can rank different combinations of goods according to the level of satisfaction they provide. This approach was developed by J.R. Hicks and R.G.D. Allen. Here, this approach contradicts the cardinal approach that said utility can be measured in numbers. Here, Hicks said that utility cannot be measured in numbers, rather than consumer can rank the different goods that they have consumed. So like if suppose I have consumed pizza and coke, so I cannot assign different numerical values to these things. In cardinal approach I can assign different numerical values, but in ordinal approach it is said that it is not possible to assign different utils or different numbers. Here we can rank, like I got more utility from pizza than from coke. So like you can rank different consume different goods that you have consumed. Here in ordinal approach they also talk about marginal rate of substitution, which is equal to marginal utility derived from x upon marginal utility derived from y is equal to price of x upon price of y. Now, marginal rate of substitution is the rate at which a consumer is willing to substitute one good for another while maintaining the same level of satisfaction. It means that marginal rate of substitution is an economic concept that refers to like how much the consumer is willing to substitute one good for another. So like if I take the example of pizza and coke, sorry. So like how much I am willing to substitute pizza from coke. So like how much pizza I am willing to give up to get one more unit of coke. That is called marginal rate of substitution. Now coming to the last topic of the today's video, that is indifference curve. Here let's first look at the definition and then I will explain it to you. An indifference curve is a graphical representation showing different combination of two goods which give the consumer the same level of satisfaction. At every point on an indifference curve, the consumer is indifferent, meaning he has no preference for one combination over another. Let's suppose there are two goods X and Y that I am consuming. So indifference curve shows different combination of X and Y that I am going to consume while maintaining same level of utility. So let's say if I consume Y1 and X1 amount of both goods, I will have the same utility as if I consume Y2 and X2 amount of the same goods. So all over the indifference curve, the utility remains constant and the value of the two goods keep on changing. States that at every point on indifference curve, the consumer is indifferent. That means on these whole points, on this whole, you can see the IC curve here, I am indifferent. So if I consume point A, if I consume this much amount or if I consume this much amount, that is V, I am going to be indifferent because I am going to derive same level of utility from both the combinations. Indifference curve was discussed in ordinal approach to measure utility, which says that we cannot assign numerical values, but we can rank different goods that we are going to consume according to the utility we are deriving from them. So indifference curve is a really important concept in microeconomics and we are going to use it a lot later when we are going to understand about utility maximization or budget minimization, expenditure minimization and everything. Okay, now let's look at some of the properties of indifference curve. First, indifference curve are downward sloping. Okay, these are always downward sloping. You can see some of the different indifference curves also later in different exception cases, but in generally indifference curves are downward sloping. This means that to maintain the same level of satisfaction, an increase in one good must be compensated by a decrease in the other. Here it also talks about the violation of indifference curve, where if both goods increase and satisfaction would increase. So like if both goods, the amount of both goods are increasing and the satisfaction also increase, so it would violate the indifference curve. The second thing is indifference curves are convex to the origin. It means that convexity implies diminishing marginal rate of substitution. So like I told you, like indifference curve we calculate marginal rate of substitution, so convexity implies that. The second is, as more of good X is consumed, the consumer is willing to give up less and less to good Y. This is called marginal rate of substitution. Here convexity refers to that. Okay, now the third one is higher indifference curve represents higher satisfaction. A curve farther from the origin indicates more quantity of at least one good, hence higher satisfaction. So here we can see that I have shown you one indifference curve. We can also like draw here multiple indifference curves, and the more different indifference curve is farther from the origin, the more it represents the higher level of satisfaction the consumer is getting. The last one is indifference curves never intersect. Yes, so two or more indifference, like whenever we are going to draw various level of indifference curves, they are never going to intersect with each other, because if two indifference curves intersect, it would violate the assumption of consistency and transitivity of preference. The last one is indifference curve do not touch axis. If an indifference curve touches an axis, it means zero consumption of one good, which contradicts the assumption that consumer consume both goods. So yes, these are the five properties of indifference curve, and I hope these are clear to you. Now, let's quickly do the last concept of today's class, and that is a consumer is in equilibrium when indifference curve is tangent to the budget line. So, let's see. This is the graph, and this is our budget line. Okay, and here indifference curve goes like this. Here we have IC, and here we have budget line. So this E points, this represents equilibrium, where the indifference curve is tangent to the budget line. Now let's also look some of the special type of indifference curves. Now I hope you all guys know what are substitutes goods, what are complement goods, what are bad goods, right? We have all learned in our 11th, 12th economics. So like whenever there is a perfect substitute, whenever there are two goods and they are perfect substitutes, indifference curve would be an straight line. Here it means like MRS is constant. Okay, so like the marginal rate of what substitution is constant. Now another is perfect complement. In this case indifference curve is going to be an L-shaped curve, okay, like this. Another is neutral goods. Neutral goods like consumer derives get satisfaction, consumer is neutral about the other good, so his or her consumption. The third one is neutral goods. Here, consumer is neutral about the other good. He or she derives satisfaction from consumption of only one good. So it can be a horizontal line or a vertical line, depend on the good. So yes, this was all about today's class, and in the next lecture we are going to learn about utility maximization using Lagrange multiplier. See you in the next class.